Alright, my name's Ian Dennison. I work at GF Strong Rehab Centre in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm here to talk to you today about caster stem angle. The caster stem has to be kept vertical. If you imagine a chair where the caster stem is leaning back at the bottom, the casters will always want to stay in that orientation, so it would be very difficult for somebody to maneuver. If the caster stems were leaning forwards from the bottom, the wheels would always want to be in this position. So every time you stopped, the wheelchair would roll back into this position, and every time you start, you would have to push up to get yourself the casters trailing, and the chair would want to wander instead of go straight. So we have to keep these as straight as we can. Now the way you measure them is by first measuring the surface that you're on. You can use one of these tools called an inclinometer. Make sure that the surface is horizontal. You can use one of these phones, it's called a cell phone, and one of the apps that you can purchase for nothing or download for free is Bubble. That's kind of like a leveling device. So I'm at 0.4 degrees, and I just check it the other way. If you calibrate, you don't have to do this 0.6, so it's probably 0.5 of a degree out, which is pretty level. Then you check the caster stem for vertical. Once we've established that the surface is horizontal, you see I'm at 1.8 degrees out, so I'm a couple of degrees out. And with this one, you can see it's just off zero. So what I need to do, it's easy to tell with this, I have to kick the bottom end of the caster stem forwards, and if I was using my cell phone, 2 degrees, if I kick the bottom forwards, that's what brings it closer to zero. Alright, there are other tools as well you can use if you don't have a phone or an inclinometer. You can use a set square, and this takes any knowledge. You don't have to know that this is horizontal, because it's just giving us a relative measure, with this being 90 degrees to each other, so that should be flush with the edge. I don't know if you can zoom in really close on that, but you can see there's a gap at the bottom of the caster stem, so that shows that it has to kick out forwards. You could also use a piece of paper, because imagine that's two triangles cut out of a piece of paper. If I had a big piece of paper here, I'd still get the same objective, except it'd be a bit floppy. So with this particular chair, it's a very involved adjustment. I have to remove my caster. I have to remove the caster lock to be able to get to the caster stem adjustment. So I'm going to remove that first, so you can see what's involved. And I'm going to leave the other side intact, so I know how to reassemble it. So remember where the bits come off. The half spacer at the bottom, the full spacer at the top. It's fairly easy to figure it out when you start reassembling, because there's a frame member in the way, and you couldn't possibly put this one on that side. Right, so now I have to remove the caster lock. Make sure I get the proper tools. Okay, so now the caster lock's off. Leave that off for now. And you're going to see now why it's so fiddly, because now I have to reassemble it. And because there's so much play when the nuts aren't on, I have to actually put the nuts on and tighten them up. At least you don't have to use tools for this job, because they're in a channel. Alright, so we have to put it back together again. Don't forget to put your spacers on. And if you need to check the other side to see how it goes, do so. And then fasten your nuts on. And because these are locking nuts, you're not going to be able to spin them on. You're going to have to use a wrench. You won't be able to spin them on until they get to the locking bit, which could be the compression part or it could be the nylock part. Right, so now we can see what we're dealing with, and I have a sample of one of these off-center nuts in my little goodie bag. Alright, I've got a little sample of the adjustment mechanism here. What we have are two bolts with dimples in the heads of the bolts, and those dimples are in line with the shaft. So if you see I've got the dimple on this sample at the 3 o'clock position, that is in line with the shaft, and the shaft is not in the center of the head. So if by rotating the shaft around, it will move the top. So if I move, it's difficult to show you. If I have this in this position, it will move the caster stem back at the top, and if I move it into that position, it will move the caster stem forwards. So that's how I achieve adjustment. So right now, because I've reassembled it, I need to move, I changed the position of the bolts from the original part of the video. So we have to move the top forward by about 3 degrees. So I'm going to loosen this off. Take out the top one and then try and figure out what I have to do to move it forwards. And in this case I want to move the dimple so that it is 3. No, got it wrong. Around about.
Then it's checked with the physio. Then it's checked to physio.
And I tighten everything up again. Told you it was tedious. Measure it. No, not close enough. But I know now I could probably get the adjustment I want just by moving the top one. I have to loosen the bottom one off just a tiny bit to allow it to rotate. Make sure I'm going in the right direction. Then tighten her up and see how close I am to being square. Okay, that's vertical. This is horizontal. So this is correctly adjusted. Sadly, it doesn't have the caster lock on, so I need to mark that. If I can find my marker. In order to put the caster lock back on, I have to take this all off, and I always forget where these nuts, where the bolts should be. So I'm going to put a line on the vertical orientation. Right, so that point of the head of the bolt should be vertical when I reassemble everything. And as long as I don't put the bottom one on the top and the top one on the bottom, I'm going to be good. So it's not a bad idea actually at this point when you're reassembling everything, because this is an area that is subject to liquids. So it's not a bad idea to use a little bit of anti-seize on these fasteners. I'm going to go through lubricant at some point on another video, but just a little bit of anti-seize on these threads will make a big difference next time you're taking these apart. You just get this kind of reassembled, realigned. Make sure, so now you can see why I'm happy that I've got my reference mark there. Make sure that's all the way up to the top, and the other one is as well. It's difficult to see, but I know I didn't move that because I had my finger holding it in place. Make sure I got the spacers on, and put these guys on. A little bit of anti-seize on the threads. Put your nuts back on and you're away to the races. Now you're only supposed to use these locking nuts once and then replace them with new ones. You see how expensive that would be, the number of times I've taken these guys off and put them back on again. So we use them until you can't finger tighten them. And then check your vertical, which it is. Make sure your table hasn't moved. Good. I can go on the other one. Now there are other caster stems that you need to play with. So I'll show you one other one that I've found to have available. So we've already gone through the caster stem adjustment for making it vertical. There are a lot of wheelchairs with variations on a design for caster stems, and you'll be able to see all the different ones that I've come across on our website iwheel.ca. But I will show you another one which is fairly commonly seen around here. So you don't actually measure the caster stem because that doesn't necessarily have to be vertical. The adjustment in this case is achieved at this little hemispherical silver part with little teeth on, and there's an abutting concave section with teeth on, and the two should mesh like this. If you need to adjust them, you loosen them off, move one relative to the other, and then re-engage them and tighten them up. So that happens here with very small teeth. The vertical section is this part of the caster fork. So once again, you check to make sure that your surface that you're on is level. This is level, and then you check to see whether that part of the caster fork is vertical, and it's a little bit off. We need to rotate this caster stem bottom back. Now these inclinometers aren't brilliant because they've got a V-shaped profile, so you have to make sure that you've got a flat flush there, but it is 3 degrees in that direction, so we have to move the bottom back a little bit. To achieve that, you remove the dust cap. There's a little notch there to start things with your screwdriver. This is going to go back on, so be as careful as you can removing it. I like to use my fingernails. And there's a little O-ring there to help secure it and to protect this area from rain and other fluids that might get into it. There's an Allen bolt at the top that's connected to the bottom silver part here. Put your Allen key in. Now if this is tight, it's going to be difficult to adjust. This is how you would normally loosen a tight Allen bolt, but because of the shape of the the housing, I'm not able to get the short end in, so I put the long end in and use an extension. I'll just turn it around a bit so you can see it clearer. Use the extension to loosen it off. If you don't have a handy extension, you can use a box end wrench, put it on here like that, and then use that to get added leverage rather than hurting your hands. So loosening this off a little bit will give you the freedom of movement that you want to be able to adjust the caster stem. So you adjust this so that it's vertical, this little element here. Back just a little bit. Difficult to see when I can't get right in there. And it tends to move a little bit too much. Okay, it looks like it's close. I'm going to tidy up now, because when the teeth meet, it kind of it's going from there. There's a little bit of play. They actually mate really well. Check. And it's pretty close to where I want to be. Now, it's important that you tighten this up pretty tight, because you've got tiny little teeth holding that in place, and you've got a fairly big bolt that you can use to tighten up, so the bolt's not going to strip. But if this is loose, those teeth, if they're in position like this and there's a little bit of play, they tend to get a little bit of momentum if you hit a curb or an obstacle and just tear each other apart, so they get smaller and smaller, and eventually you get a caster that doesn't stay in adjustment. So you can tighten that up pretty tightly, and then once again make sure that you're vertical and that is spot on. Okay? So as I say, iWheel.ca to check out the other mechanisms by which you achieve caster stems being vertical.